So good evening, thank you so very much for coming. Welcome to the candidate forum for the Pullman School Board District 3. My name is Carol Van Hoeke, and I've been the League of Women Voters observer for the school board since 2018. And I'll be your moderator this evening. I've been told I should make sure that the mic is close to my mouth. So for those of you in the back, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Excellent, thank you so much. Very good. This forum is also on Zoom and will be recorded and available 24 to 48 hours from tonight for viewing on the League of Women Voters of Pullman and Whitman County website. That is
24 only.
24 only. Nice. Up in the ante. I love it. Okay, so within 24 hours, that website is lvwpullman.org. Tell everybody that's not here where they can go to watch our candidates and their answers to your brilliant questions.
Carol, you said LWB?
LVW.
No.
LWV.
LWV.
Yes.
Typo.
Uh-huh.
I read what I wrote. I just wrote what was wrong. Okay. So we'll begin our meeting with our nonpartisan statement, which will be read by our president, Allie Welch. Here.
Thank you. The League acts in support of or opposition to selected governmental issues which its members have studied. It does not support or oppose candidates, factions, or political parties. League members as individuals are urged to work in the political party of their choice. To protect the League's nonpartisanship policy, guidelines regarding the political activities of the Board of Directors are reviewed frequently. The League of Women Voters of Pullman is fully committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and practice. These concepts are central to our current and future success in engaging all individuals, households, communities, and policymakers in creating a more perfect democracy. We acknowledge and honor the first people of the Palouse region and their descendants, including our neighbors, the Nez Perce, Colville, and Coeur d'Alene tribes. Thank you.
Thanks, Allie. Okay, I'm very pleased to introduce to you our two candidates for District 3. The incumbent, Dr. Everman, you want to raise your hand or wave or something? And his challenger, Craig Nelson. Thank you. Okay, and without further, we need to just, a couple of housekeeping things. Please make sure your phones or other electronic devices the sounds are turned off. And also, if you wouldn't mind holding your applause until after the candidates have made their closing remarks. That would be very much appreciated. So we'll start out with opening remarks, and we'll just start with you, Dr. Everman. You have 2 minutes to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you very much. Friday evenings are usually movie and a popcorn night for us and the family, so I applaud you for being here tonight to listen to Craig and I. Please call me Jim. Dr. Everman was at Washington State University, which I retired just a year and a half ago. So that was after 46 years. But we've lived in Pullman, my wife and Maureen and I, with our 4 children for 46 years. This was up until that time, we had traveled to different universities to go to school. So we always had a 5-year plan. So our Pullman stay was going to be 5 years, and it turned out to be much, much longer. Great place to raise a family, great place to work, but most importantly, I think, was the quality of the education in Pullman. We found that just all 4 of our kids thrived in this environment, whether it was sports or whether it was drama, stage, and academically, and they all went on to do what they loved to do. Maureen and I didn't really have to mentor them very much. They had excellent teachers, and I think that was where the mentoring came from. So I owe Pullman a lot, and that's why I'm running for school board re-election. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. And Mr. Nelson, please introduce yourself.
They just turned it off? No. My name's Craig Nelson. Please call me Craig. I have just retired from being in public education for 42 years. I started in 1981 and I just ended in June. So I'm just starting my retired life. My wife and I moved here in 2000 and we raised 3 children here in Pullman. They all went on to great things, as Jim said. You know, the teachers in Pullman is what makes the school district great. That their effort and their desire and their connection with students is really what sets Pullman apart from other places. I think I started my career 19 years as an ag teacher in Enumclaw, Washington, and that experience gave me a lot of a variety of experiences, from teaching in a classroom to teaching shop. I coached parliamentary procedure teams, I coached livestock judging teams, and so that working with kids and being connected to what they do really has set me up for the leadership positions that I've had as both an assistant principal at the high school here, principal at Jefferson Elementary School for 15 years, and then I went on to Puyallup and was over there for 5 years. So I've had a lot of variety of experiences, and still come back to, if we're going to say kids are number one in the school district, then teachers are a very close second. And somewhere down the list are principals, and somewhere down the list are other school board, because we should be acting as support personnel for what's happening in the classroom. That's where the magic is, and what happens in the lives of children. So that's my introduction.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you. It's very nice to meet you. So I'll start out with the first question, and we're going to just alternate back and forth with who's starting. So Mr. Nelson, we'll start with you on the first question. And so this question is, do you think our schools should teach the dark parts of our history as regarding the Indians, Chinese, blacks, Japanese, etc.?
When we teach history, we should teach history. I mean, we should teach what's there. I mean, those are things where we as a society are going to have to deal with, and that they're going to have to deal with. And unless we know about them, we will repeat them. History tends to repeat itself anyway. But we should be teaching, to the best of our ability, the truth of what's going on. And you talk about Native American history. There's two sides to that coin, and we've been taught different things about that struggle. We've taught different things about all kinds of struggles. And so our role as a school district and as our role in preparing students for the future is to make sure that they have the strongest foundation possible. But even the dark parts are important.
Well, I believe that we should be inclusive of all cultures, and I believe that's what we've taught our children to do. I recall when we went back to Frederick, Maryland, back in my sabbatical at Fort Detrick, we went into Washington, D.C. almost every weekend. And that was our first encounter with homeless people, because the kids asked us, why were people sleeping on the streets? And they were so traumatized by that one of my daughters actually went on to become a social worker. That was the kind of experience that she had from that kind of environment. We had not experienced homelessness in Pullman, obviously. Occasionally you might run into it in Spokane, but there again, it was that interchange, that teaching, and by example, I think that's really, really important. We should be very, very accepting of all people, and I think that's what we teach in our schools as well. So again, that's where we stand.
Thank you very much, both of you. And so we'll reverse order. So Jim, we'll start with you for the next question. Okay. Are you in favor of banning some books? If so, would you give some examples?
Really, I'm not in favor of banning any books. I think books are a way of expressing, an author expresses their feelings in a book, and we have the choice then to accept or to choose what we read. And I think that's what we should be doing, even in the library system. Books for all people, as I said, were inclusive. And I think for that, then the choice becomes which books would that person, that child read. And I think that comes a lot from the parents. It comes from the teachers on what they recommend. We always had books in our home, starting from the easy readers up to the more complex. And I believe that reading should not be banned. Therefore, books should not be banned.
Still largely agree with Jim that the careful selection of books to begin with is already a selection process that weeds out some books. So a school library, a school setting isn't necessarily the Library of Congress where everything is there. They serve different purposes. But books should be challenging the students' perceptions of what their world is. It should be opening them up to what else there is in the world. When I was principal at Jefferson, we had a family contest a book. It was a book by Patricia Polacco called My Mother's House. And it was about a family that had two mothers. And it was a story about making nochi and family activities and going on outings. But they just really took against that idea that we were teaching about a family that didn't have a mother and a father but had two mothers. Two students in that classroom were living in that situation with two mothers. And so anyway, went through the whole process, very proud of the district, proud of the school board in upholding that was a book that we can still read here in Pullman, even though some parents were upset about it.
Thank you very much, both of you. And so we'll start then with you, Craig, on the next question. Okay. What is your opinion of charter schools?
Of course, in my perception, I'm a real fan of public education, and charter schools are technically public education, but they're focused on some different populations, and so we can do some selective things. I always voted against the charter school initiatives as they came through, but now that we have one in town, the education of students in Pullman is all of our jobs, whether at the charter school or whether they're at the public school, whether they're at a private school. That we have a responsibility to put out the best information that we can to help provide a substance or a foundation for all of those students to find success in their future.
Well, I think charter schools offer another alternative, and I think that's what we would like to have in a free education society. Private schools, charter schools within the public school system. My main concern is that any school, whether it's private, charter, or public, would have those same standards in which teachers would be accredited, students would be accepted based on being inclusive. And so I think they would be, any school should have the same set of standards in which they accept and teach their children.
Thank you both, and so we'll have you stand up again in just a second and take the next question. What is the school board's procedure for hiring administrators? Is it adequate? Could it be improved? And if so, how?
I think administrators, they hold up a different level within the school system. They're in charge of administration, personnel, budgetary responsibilities. And I think for that matter, they should be selected in conjunction with peers from outside the school district. They should also be selected by selected board members They also should be selected by a parent group and a teacher group. So all those groups should be involved in the selection process for those administrators. And I recall the last search we had, I think that was about 8 years ago, I was the representative from the board for that particular selection of that administrator. And we had exactly that, representatives from the community, parents, teachers, school board, and peer administrators. Another district came in to help because they obviously have administrative experience. Thank you.
Yes, administrators hold a different position, and they're in charge of just so many things. The physical plant of the school, they need to know something about that, where shut-off valves are and all of those things, and some facility with how a building runs as a machine. Also has to motivate teachers to work together, to connect. This person also has to reach out and connect to community. Person has to certainly connect and work with students really well. Both students that are well behaved and those that aren't. That we have to work with them really well. And so that selection process does require a great deal of consideration in teachers in the building, community people, PTA leadership or PTO leadership, depending on which school you're from, and should have those things, and then as it goes up through the process to include district administrators and community-wide support for such a candidate.
Thank you both very much. The next question. How can a school board know if its goals are being accomplished and its policies are being implemented? So we'll start with you, Craig.
Well, goals should have, this is just good lesson planning, that the goal of the lesson should have an outcome embedded in it. And so can't just say we want to raise test scores. We want to make sure that we're going to define how we're going to how we're going to score that in the end. Starting with the end in mind is a good way to get that idea of whether or not we're going to actually make our goals or not. The system of making goals in a school sometimes have a lot of angles to them, a lot of facets. And sometimes those facets are directly student related and sometimes they're not. And so that would be one thing I would want to look for as a school board member is, are they student focused or are they focused on other considerations that are detracting from what's happening to the students?
We, on the school board currently, review our goals every year. And the way we do that is talk amongst ourselves at workshops. But we also go out to the community because, again, school board members are representative of the community. And so the best bell chart for goals is to go to the community and see if these are working. Okay, they will tell you. The parents feel that their students are not getting, or their children are not getting an adequate education, they will let us know. So in order to assess whether a goal is working or not, you really need to go out and get input. You just can't keep it within the small sphere of the school board itself. So I think the goals need input from as many people as possible.
This past year, so this was going into the second year of professional learning communities through Monday Late Start. There's a little bit of a tension there between the school district and formative assessments being written in those times, and maybe what teachers might want to do with that professional learning community time. Can you talk about how the district can blend the assessment work that's going on with some of the goals the teachers have?
the professional learning communities has evolved. Initially, it was about 10 years ago, we introduced that concept into the school district primarily for allowing the teachers to interact, so that fourth grade teachers from the different schools were all teaching the same type of curriculum. And so the students coming out of that grade would then be able to go up to the next grade, 5th grade, and they would have some kind of standard education in hand. We were only doing that, we would assess a full day, and it was 7 times a year. The teachers found that very, very difficult to comprehend and to get work done. So then we went to the new model that you just described, which is time, usually every Monday in the morning, where the teachers will meet, they will assess, they will either work within their group, within their own school, or they'll have several schools together, again, usually grade related, like all the 4th grade teachers from all the elementary schools. This has been very, very fruitful because the teachers feel like they're doing it on a regular basis, number one, and number two, they get to see what their peers are doing in the other schools. So it's just really worked out well. How to integrate it requires constant communication, but that's part of the professional learning community, this communication. And that's been another goal of ours over the past couple of years, to emphasize that.
First of all, teachers never have enough time to plan. We can't pay them for all the time that it takes to plan. I used to tell my high school students back in Enumclaw, if they watched a comedy show on a Thursday night, whatever, I wanted to count how many people were in the credits. They used to roll the credits back in those days, and everybody kind of got credit. And it was between 60 and 75 people for 30 minutes of entertainment once a week. Just to show them that a teacher is in charge of an educational plan, a lesson, behavior modification, all of those things, 6 hours a day, facing students, with a half an hour before school and a half an hour after school. And then at the elementary school, 45 minutes of planning time, or at the high school, an hour of planning time. So it's just not enough time to get it all done. And so reserving some time for a specific purpose to talk about students, talk about tests, talk about curriculum, coordinate between themselves, I think is critical in having the school develop and perform at the level we want them to perform. I do recognize, though, that adds an onus on the families for daycare, 1 day a week, they're not going to school at the same time, all of those things. But it is pretty critical. The idea of getting a group of professionals together, 4th grade teachers, to talk about a particular subject or talk about a particular problem of practice is the best way to get to a solution of that problem of practice. Let them talk about it, let them dig it out. If we have administrators standing over their shoulders and saying, you should do it this way, you should do it this way, they're not there every day. They don't see that situation. They don't see those things. So getting teachers involved in that, I think, is the critical way to solve that problem.
Next question. Is there adequate career or college or specialized post-high school learning in Pullman schools?
As an agriculture teacher for 19 years, that focus on career, focus on what you're going to do outside of high school is a pretty big topic. And I think we had sent a lot of messages. And I think the population in general is finding that going to college isn't necessarily the path to success that it once was. There's debt, there's other things that kind of lead up to that. So I think informing students about the breadth of the workforce is a positive way to encourage that. Give an example of my son. Left high school, went to John Deere Mechanic School, loved it, learned how to work on John Deere machinery. Did that for a few years, found out there was not a whole lot of room for progression in that particular field. And so he went to a chemical dealer as a mechanic, climbed the ranks until he became an account manager. So he basically is running one of the McGregor plants out there. And so that breadth of understanding of being able to do things, being able to think through problems, being able to do those things, that allowed him to go from mechanic work, get a degree, get some other work out there. And I think that the Pullman School District helped him do that by seeing the breadth and the variety of that. Is it enough? I don't know that it can ever be enough. We're talking about the futures of students. But I think that idea that there's lots of things out there for them to grab onto, I think they just need to always be focused on providing more of that.
Well, that's really a good question, career counseling, and how is it being implemented, how is it being taken advantage of, and what's the future of the young men and women that are graduating from high school. In our own family, we had one go right into the military right out of high school. We had one go to work for a year, then go on to college, and then two, they couldn't wait to get out of their senior year so they could go to college. So that kind of mix is what you see in families. Those individual traits that allow them to progress quickly, they've already made up their mind, and again, this is without a lot of mentorship from Maureen and I, but that's happening at the high school. The options for career development are very, very good right now. But like Greg said, what the future will hold, are there more and more positions that will be available? Will they be in different sectors of the population? Artificial intelligence, computer applications have really, really been hot. And there are some kids that are going to jump right into those areas. So I think we do offer a good array of options for the kids to search for a career or go into the workforce, work a year, or go into the military and serve their country. Lots of options.
Thank you. Next question. Where would you look to make budget cuts if necessary? Are there areas you would not consider cutting?
That's another tough question. Pullman School District right now is balancing their budget, but we're very frugal. We're not looking at spending a lot of money. We're trying to conserve as best we can. We like to keep the best teachers on the payroll. We like to keep the best administrators within our ranks. We like to keep the best counselors within the schools. That requires a certain amount of budgetary expenditure. And right now, our total budget for the Pullman School District, about 82 to 85% is for personnel. Okay, personnel, so that we can get the quality there, and the rest, 13–15%, are used for things that we have to take care of as well. Buildings on the, or roofs on the buildings, playgrounds, that kind of thing. So there's always some budgetary manipulation that goes on. I serve on the Finance Committee with Nathan Roberts, and we have regular meetings with our budget officer, Diane Hodge. She goes through the budget, and you'd be surprised how much time we just spend talking about whether or not we should get a new school bus or not. But then I always bring up safety. Let's get the new school bus, and Joe says, okay. So I think it's really important that we have these budgetary constraints, but we have to have some flexibility to make those decisions.
Well, there's never enough money in a school budget. There's always more that we want to do than we have money for. And so I think anything that touches the kids directly should be hands-off, especially when safety is concerned. That what we provide to the students is number one. And the farther we get away from what's actually going to affect that student, that's where the decisions have to start being made. And whether that's, well, anything that deals with the kids, and it needs to be prioritized, and then after that, decisions have to be made. It is pretty typical across the state for school districts to run about 82–85% of their budget into labor costs. And yet on the other side, every student gets allocated about $1,400 in what's called MSOC, material supply and operating costs, and out of that pocket of money should come insurance and heat and building supplies and teaching supplies, all of those things. I think when I left Pullman, we were getting about 75 cents per day per student for our building budgets. And so that, out of that $1,400, that didn't always add up real well. So there are some modifications I would suggest, but there again, not being on the school board, not knowing all of the different pockets of money that are out there or things that we need to spend money on, that needs to be addressed.
Okay, next question. When our current superintendent retires, do you support doing a search for the best candidate?
Yes. The superintendent has a great deal of onus, or a lot of pressure to make sure that a lot of needs are being met within the district, and also connecting with the community to make sure that the community is in line. So making sure that we find a candidate that can handle all of the varied tasks that are required of a superintendent would be paramount, and making sure that we had teachers, administrators, community people, just like we did for the building administrators, having everybody there, having some community forums, having some people out there so that we can get a good feel for whether or not this candidate would be a fit for this community.
Yeah, I think if Dr. Maxwell, when he retires, looking for a new superintendent is one of the most important jobs that a school board, in addition to the community, would have on the selection of that candidate to fill that position. Because we are looking for a multifaceted person, someone that knows budgets, knows personnel, knows property management, and knows how to work in order for the curriculum for the students. They've had that experience. Teaching experience, I think, is invaluable for superintendents. So I would look to other superintendents in the area for advice, for counsel, and I would solicit any input from the community as well, especially from the teachers.
Thank you. Next question. What issues do you think will be most worrisome during the next term?
Well, I'm afraid to say this, but it must be said, school safety. I think it's an issue. I just came back from Baltimore, the inner city, where they have armed guards at the doors. They have armed policemen within the hallways. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what kind of a learning environment is that creating? But I think safety is an issue that we need to address. We need to be prepared. We have engaged the Pullman Police Department to be available to, and they have their exercises where they do things to be prepared. But I think preparedness is one of the biggest things we need to address. We're very blessed, we're very fortunate that we live in Pullman, like I said before. But I think we also need to be prepared. So safety issues, I believe, are the number one.
So far this summer, I've been invited to people's homes to speak about, or to listen to them about several concerns in the district. Transportation being one, equity being another, special education being a third, and that the people that are so interested in improving these parts of the school district have been to the school board to speak, have taken their 3 minutes, have done those things, and they're less than pleased at the response, I guess, that we need to work better at responding to the concerns of the public. If we're going to ask them to speak, we should be able to address some of those issues in a more direct manner to the people that took the time to come and speak. There are budget issues with that, time issues with that, all kinds of things. But in the next term, budgetary issues and safety would be number one. But then also we need to find a better way to communicate and to resolve the problems that people are at least feeling in the district.
Thank you. Next question. Does the district take enough advantage of having a major university in town? How can that be expanded?
Well, I know when I was a principal at Jefferson, we would take a lot of field trips. And people would say, oh, field trips, they're so expensive, they're so long, they take away from other things. But there would be a parent that could show us a planetarium 2 miles away. There would be other opportunities in animal science and all kinds of things that our kids in Pullman have been able to get an experience with that is just not possible in other parts of the state. Much bigger school district, Puyallup, we rarely took field trips because it was a long trip, it was a long place, it just never happened. We got one a year per class. But in Pullman, we have taken advantage of that. One real positive activity that has faded away, and I don't know where the disconnect came from, was between the Chamber of Commerce and the WSU, they would do a job shadow on Groundhog's Day. I always thought that was cute that they do that on Groundhog's Day. But a student at Pullman High School could basically say, I want to be an astronaut. And we don't have astronauts at WSU, but we have physicists and we have other people. So we could do a job shadow in any job category by leaning on WSU. We also leaned on Schweitzer. We also leaned on other businesses in the community. So we had lots to do there. But that's, I think that the relationship between WSU can always be stronger. And I think that we can use those I don't know why I forgot that word.
Connections?
The expertise for people at that can share with kids.
I think education in its broadest sense is to include the community, and I regard WSU as part of our community. I wouldn't stop at WSU. I would look at University of Idaho. I'd look at the colleges down in Lewiston. I'd look at Eastern Washington, because I think there's expertise in each one of those. Eastern Washington is doing population studies on the climate and the effects upon therein. And I think Washington State, we're already in partnership with them to look at equity issues, having their faculty. There's always experts all around, and I think we should be looking at them and developing partnerships the best we can. We should be much broader. The trouble is trying to finance those particular partnerships, and I think there has to be a mutual benefit for anybody that participates in those. So I'm encouraging us to develop more of those as we progress.
Thank you. Next question. How are we going to remediate the effects of the COVID quarantine?
Another tough question. I think a number of issues have come from the COVID pandemic. Many people are still working from home. They're doing some at-home teaching. So I think in terms of how to remediate that is just to press on. I'm very encouraged by the teachers who they made it through last year, which was a tough year. We're now looking at the second year post-pandemic, and I believe there is a esprit de corps amongst the teacher population because they can see the benefits, and administration has seen the benefits as well of the time spent on trying to get the kids through their social, emotional well-being issues, and so we can get back to the business of education. But the business of education is much more than just the learning part of it. It is the social aspect of getting the kids back in school, getting them back into the athletic, drama, theater areas. So I think there's this feeling that we need to focus on learning, but there's also the focus that we should be looking at in terms of how to engage the students so that they feel socially acceptable at the schools, and they can look at different options for learning and their social emotional well-being.
Well, as I say, I wish this was an easy answer, and I wish that if education was just a product, we could probably get them back to that point in a few years with the right thing. But it's not. There's so much more to it. There's the socialization. There's the work that the teachers do. And I just can't accept that some students who have lost 2 years of education and that there will be no comeuppance for it. There will be no consequence to that. And there's a lot of variety of reasons to that. It's not the teacher's fault. It's not the school district's fault. It's just the way it happened. But we can't just say, well, we can't do anything about it, let's do it. We need to do everything we can to get students back up to where they could be. They can select the future that they want to select at the end of their educational career. The pandemic will be with us a while. One thing, the funding that came with it was great, but that's going away. And so things got funded and started that now we get back to the budget question, we need to think about coming back away from. And so it has really improved computer access to all of the schools. It's improved a number of things across the district and every district in the state. But that money from the federal government and the state government is going away. And so we need to be cognizant of that. And so we didn't start programs that then will just go away because there's no funding.
Thank you. Next question. How can we address bullying in Pullman schools?
You can't just say no bullying. I mean, it is, as we learn about history, we learn about things, bullying's been a part of the human condition and in civil society for many centuries. And it doesn't mean as though it was ever okay, and it's not okay now, that someone with a particular trait is going to be denied access to other opportunities because of that trait. But I think, ever vigilant, and the teaching part of that is what's the critical part, not just the discipline side of it. Dealt with a lot of bullying issues, and the victim wants to bully, like they've got this label on them all the time, that they're always the bully. Well, that same person has been bullied in their past. So it's a huge cycle that we need to address every piece of that cycle, not just the one. But we have to make sure that students are treating each other fairly and that they're not taking advantage, the strong taking advantage of the weak. Is just not going to be a way that we want to develop a society or our community here in Pullman.
Yeah, I think the bullying situation is one that we need to have no tolerance for, basically. We have policies, we have procedures to address that at the classroom level. It puts a lot of onus and responsibility upon the teachers, and I know what kind of commitment that has to be. It's one in which we have to keep close attention on. It's one that we have to find not just a policy, but we have to find a place for that person that is bullying. We have to find a mentor for that person. That's basically the only way you can work your way out of a bullying situation, is find someone that the person can relate to, someone that they can work with, someone that they can be counseled by in order for them to exist in society, and that's what we're talking about. So I mentioned social emotional well-being earlier. I think that's a focus that we all have to work on. But how to function in society is one of our educational objectives. Just getting through school, that's an objective. That's a learning tool that we can implement to get those kids that have a propensity for bullying, hurting others. We can get them to a point where they can function in society, and I think that's where we should be heading.
Thank you. The next question. Is there a need for the public to request changes to state lawmakers for financial or educational policy?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, of course. Is there a need for the public to request changes from state lawmakers for financial or educational policy?
Oh, most assuredly. Just those here this evening, if we were to start a letter writing campaign to our local legislators saying we need, what did we just say? Laws against bullying, laws that would implement more mentorship. That's something that they should be addressing, even if they don't address it this year. The point is that we, as a group, have put our name to paper and we're saying we need this. We need this funding for this particular project that we would like to implement. It would benefit the state, and that should be the first sentence in that recommendation. This would benefit the state to have kids that aren't bullying. So that would be a recommendation that we could implement. That's the value of community. So would it help for the school district or for the board to write letters to the legislatures? Well, we're already doing that. The community would need to be involved in that process. So that's where I would ask you for that help.
Yes, parent involvement, community involvement in the funding of schools is going to be paramount in the next time to make sure that we are in front of the board, of the legislature. Thing is, they're not sitting there saying which bad program can we cut so we can fund good ones. There's a contingent, there's a body of people supporting each one of those programs. And so it's not as though they can just say, we've got this extra money we could throw at schools. They've got to move things around at the state level to enable that to happen. keeping that word in front of them from parents, from people in the community, from teachers, is going to be critical in making sure that the importance and the importance of education and the impact it has on the state will have. Several years ago, a state, not Washington, used to look at graduating test scores to determine how many prisons they would need in 5 years. It was a direct correlation, and they used it to connect those dots so that they could be prepared to incarcerate people rather than educate them and give them opportunities on the front end. And so if we can reverse that somehow, so if we can get the impact in sooner, that would be better. And that's going to happen through voters writing to the legislature.
Maybe just a follow-up on that question. I know that on the board, you're connected to legislative matters, and you help vote for priorities with the, what do you call it, the people that lobby, right? So how can you get those priorities that have been determined out to the community to request their help with lobbying? We'll start with you, Jim.
Well, that would be an excellent mechanism because we do have a legislative committee for our Washington State public school directors. And they do bring to the legislators a list, mandates that we would like to include. There's always politics involved. But I think that would be a good coalition between the community and the school district to do that and send it to the legislature. That might be a unique mechanism whereby rather than hearing from the old voices, they'd also hear from the community as well. So there's a coalition developing. That's what I said, the strength of us just here tonight, that's a start, because I think what that does is you're thinking in the back of your mind, well, we could just put together a partnership with the school district and we could write to our legislatures to get this moving. And I think that would add power. And that's really what you're talking about at the legislative level, is power. Okay, there is a financial aspect, but it's usually finances and power usually go hand in hand. So, and the community does have power, believe me.
Could I get the question again?
Oh, gosh.
I know.
The school board has, through the professional organization, which the acronym I can't remember, but they prioritize and then they give that to the lobbyists. So how could you get that priority list out to the community to engage them in that lobbying effort?
It goes along with the communication from the district out to the community in a variety of different ways. Every one of the professional organizations, the WASDA, which is the School Directors Association, WASA, which is the Superintendents Association, AWSP, which is the Principals Association, WA, which is the Teacher Association, they all have legislative priorities. So these lists are all out there and are typically communicated to the membership of that body. But I think that's a great idea to get it out there so that we can say, here are the legislative priorities of all of these groups that we pay dues to. As a school district, we have people on each of these groups to say, how are we going to support the people? And as Jim said, it's more about power than it is about anything else. Money is a side benefit of that, but lots of things need to get tied up in a bow here, but the impact of the community is just paramount, and the more voices they hear, the more they will deal with that. We do have, this is just a political comment, the majority leader of the Senate is our senator from this part of the state, and so he's been kind of a tough nut to crack as far as educational issues, but with enough input, that's one of the things that might do it.
No sabía. I didn't know that. Next question. There's been a gap in educational outcomes between students of various minorities ranging from 20 to 30%. I'm assuming that's related to assessment scores. We have experienced a loss of teachers of color in Pullman. What will it take to address these inequalities? How would you help address them? So Craig, we'll start with you.
One of the difficult parts of staffing a school, especially in Pullman, is to bring enough people of color into that world. And it's not as though they'll just sit there alone in this little pond and just be happy. They need a community of like-minded people, other people in the area to feed that. And so we talk about connections with WSU, we talk about connections with other community bodies. One of the ways we need to do that, we need to do better, is to connect with them to say, how do we build a better community for people of color to come and teach in our schools. Because they add so much. I hired many of them as a principal, and they would bring the holidays of their country into the classroom so kids would learn about it. Had one person banging a drum and singing a song at Christmas time, just before Christmas time, all up and down the halls, all because it's a Puerto Rican tradition. And so those were just a couple of examples of the great things that they bring to our schools. It's difficult to hold on to them because they are looking for other things. That if they're going to raise children, they're going to do things. My church up the hill, they have a Chinese school, and so Chinese students can come and learn their culture, even though they're only going to be here for 4 or 5 years. So when they go back, they'll understand what their culture is all about. So more of those kinds of activities supported by the school district would be great.
Well, if you haven't noticed it or not, Pullman is becoming multicultural. And I think the workforce is bringing a lot of people of other cultures into our community. We can take advantage of that by inviting them to come into our classrooms. I remember our kids had the benefit of having a wonderful teacher from the Philippines, Rosalie Harms. She came, she taught the culture, she embraced that, the kids embraced it. They didn't have to go to that other country to get the immersion that they needed. So I think, in other words, we can use both the teachers that are within our system and then also the invitation to the community to come in and share their cultural beliefs and their gifts with our students. And I think we should be doing that. More of an interchange between the school district and the community itself.
Just a follow-up to that, the College of Education has a program called Future Teachers of Color. And so that's definitely something that, one way the district could connect to the university and work with students in that program. Of course, students may choose to go back to communities where there's more people that have a cultural background like theirs, but there's nothing like an invitation anyway, so just throwing that out there. Next question. Is there adequate training for personal financial matters and job searching for students? We'll start with Jen.
There is in the DECA program at the high school. It's designed specifically to get the high school student to embrace their budgetary responsibilities, to get ready for career development. So I believe that there already are mechanisms in place. And I think, basically, I think once you have the student buy into that, then they can see the value. But it also, DECA does invite people from the community, other trades, to come in and talk about their profession. So I think not only do you learn budgetary responsibility, but you learn what the outcome is going to be. You see someone on the other side that has a job in that particular career. So I think that kind of interchange is going to be essential, and it's already being done at the high school.
Yes, I'd say within the CTE department, and that's all of the ag, DECA, the home economics, family and consumer science is what it's called now. All of those things do a good job of talking about career paths within their field. We have a lot of students. When I was assistant principal at the high school, we ran a course called Information Technology, which was basically a one semester class of computer literacy, computer technology, that theoretically the students would need to have that in order to complete their senior project. They took it as a freshman and they had to take, they would need to have these skills in order to graduate from high school with a senior project. We don't do senior projects anymore, but we got a lot of pushback on that program. It seems like a good idea, seems like things, but people say, I'd rather take that extra math class, I'd rather take that extra weightlifting class, I'd rather take this other class. I don't want to have another class in information technology forced on me, and yet that is the workforce of today and on into tomorrow, is having a facility with information technology. And so sometimes we have to do things according to what the community wants. I mean, if the teacher is only going to get a lot of pushback, and it was, you know, it was the Microsoft programs, and it was PowerPoint is really what the class was, and it was it got some pushback, even though in our hearts and in our the purpose of it was to prepare them for the future, prepare them for the challenges yet to come.
Okay, this might be kind of in connection to the reaching out to the community for lobbying, but how can the board be accessible to the community? I'll start with you, Greg.
Well, I think community forums, I think meetings like this, I think being out there where people can ask questions, it would be a great idea. The community has a lot of concerns. Like I said, I know some of the people that asked me to come and talk to them or visit with them in their homes about different issues with the district. I knew some of them and I didn't know others. They just called me and said, could we talk? And so I went over there to listen. That openness or that attitude that we want to hear from you, I think is one of the things that needs to be enhanced through the school district. I think, I personally don't like the 3-minute timer at the public discussion time or the public presentation time. I think there's some manipulation that could be done with that timer that could enhance the way the community connects with the school board and with the school district.
Well, like I said early on, the school board member represents the community, and so it's our job to go out to the community. We're supposed to be engaged in the community. We can do that with joining the PTA, going to their meetings. We can be engaged just at the local level by developing these partnerships. Would you mind coming into the class, talking to the teachers, that kind of thing? I think it's important for the board member to understand that they do represent the community, but it's not a one-way street. It's not the community impacting the board member. The board member needs to reach out to the community as well. And so we each have our own school. There's 5 board members. We have a school, and I think one of the board members has 2 schools. But we try and engage as much as we can with them, and let them know what the mission of the school board is and how we interact with administration, how we interact with the budgets, what concerns do you have. And so I think we just need to work harder to do that. Aaron Carter, who's sitting in the back here, one of our newest members, he's great at doing that, because what he's doing right now is he's learning about the board. He already knows what the concerns of the community are, but he's bringing those into the board. But he goes back and he represents the community very well. So that's what we need to do. We need to develop that liaison and continue to work on it. Communication, communication, communication.
you. This may be the last question, or maybe one more after that. So it was mentioned that we don't do the senior project at PHS anymore, and the question is why?
Well, we do have the senior project, but it has a different name. Basically, it's career choices. What the students do is they work with the mentor throughout the year. They put together a poster on what they would like to do when they graduate from high school. And if any of them were like me, I had no idea what I was going to do after I graduated from high school. So I think what you do is you work with the student, you put on this poster, you do it orally, it's an oral poster. You have crowds that come through, they ask you questions. I think it's a much more meaningful project because you're asking the student to do the work and project what they may want to do in their future. And it may or may not work. But invariably, it's a good interaction because the student then is forced to think about this, put together a presentation, and the public comes in and then looks at the poster. And I think it's that kind of interaction that's really valuable. And that's what a senior project should do.
The senior project was a way for us to address a requirement from the state to stamp onto a high school diploma. It wasn't something we just made up. People all over the state were doing it in a variety of different ways. And as the state looked to change and improve their processes, that's one of the things they took off, that it was no longer required. As a CTE teacher for 19 years, that hands-on aspect of the senior project was really important to me. It was really nice to be able to see kids do something that they wouldn't have normally done, try something new, do something, and yet you didn't want, if they wanted to rebuild an engine, you didn't want the fact that their engine didn't run at the end to keep them from graduating from high school. And so those were the lines that were being drawn in it. You had to finish your project. And so I know a girl wanted to do a quilt. We didn't know it was a king-size quilt. And she was saying, this took me so many hours. I just was on this all the time. And yeah, no doubt. But there was just those bits and pieces, and you want to put good experiences in front of students so that they can learn and grow. You don't necessarily want to put hurdles in front of families that can't afford a big project, don't have the time to dedicate to it, don't have the mentor support that other kids would have to prevent them from graduating from high school.
Okay. This is a difficult question. We'll start with you, Craig. What differentiates you from the other candidate?
Youth. It's been a long time since I was the young one. I've said, people would say, why are you running for the school board? And I said, a lot of different reasons, a lot of different, my heart is in public education. I was in it for 42 years, learned a lot about law, learned a lot about district policy, learned a lot about things. And I think I could be a positive voice on the board for improvement. One of the things I don't want is running against Jim. And I said, I'm running against the nicest man in Pullman. And that's absolutely true. When teachers would retire from school after so many years, personal note from Jim would follow. And so I can't say enough for the impact Jim has had on this district and on this thing. So I know I'm not supposed to say good things about the other guy, but I can't help it because Jim is Jim. I just would say that I think I bring to the board a teacher's perspective, a principal's perspective. Whatever's done at the board has to make sense where it's being applied and put to use at the building level so that kids get the best program they can have. And so that, I guess, is my strongest suit, is that I understand what it is to magnify the effort of those teachers and to make them as effective and as efficient and as happy as we can make them.
Could you repeat that question again? Just kidding. I think the difference between myself and Craig is I have more experience. I've been on the school board for 16 years. I know the ins and the outs. It's grown considerably. Budgetary constraints have become more severe. The expectations on behalf of the students, parents, and teachers has increased remarkably. And I think it's challenged us who are on the school board to pay attention, to be communicative. And I think that's basically the difference. But another difference is I'm not an administrator. I worked at WSU in the laboratory, raised the family. I've always been a teacher, and I think I represent the community. And I think that's exactly what you want in a school board member. Because remember, the school board member is the representative of the community at the school district level. That's a very important consideration. Okay? We don't need another administrator serving on the school board. We need community members serving on the school board, because that's who they represent. And so we listen as a community member, we act as a community member, and we try and get the school district to implement those ideas. So I look to you for input, I look to you for ideas, I look to you for complaints, because then I take them to the school district who has to address those. So, but experience is something I have.
It just occurred to me that a school board session ago or so, certainly within the last month, a gentleman came to the comment section, and he was from Clarkston, and he's running for the school board in Clarkston. He wanted to know, gosh, Pullman's doing a great job. What recommendation do you have for me? So let's repeat that and say, if you were to tell this gentleman running for the school board in Clarkston, what makes Pullman such an exemplary place, and what advice would you give to him about being on the school board somewhere else? What makes Pullman School Board so good? So we'll start with, I think it's Jim, and then we'll do Craig, and then we'll do closing remarks.
Well, I loved it, the fact that that fellow came up from Clarkston just to observe our school board. He had heard that we run a very efficient meeting, that we communicate, that we have an agenda. At his school board meeting in Clarkston, they don't even have an agenda, and it's not produced. I mean, so how can you function if as a guidance for others, especially leading a large school district, unless you have an agenda, unless you have time limits? And I know that 3 minutes is tough. It's tough. But that's not the only time we're available to talk to our community, right? I can talk to the community on Friday evening at 6:30 in the evening, okay? Or I can run into you at the Daily Grind, which used to be the Daily Grind. Now I go to the Roost. But that's where I usually meet with my constituents. Let's go have a cup of coffee. So it's not confined to a meeting time, especially on Friday evenings. It's a time to get together. You have to be receptive. And so I think what he did was come up and see how a meeting is run from start to finish, and he was just amazed that it could be run so efficiently. It's not that we're trying to get through in a speedy manner, it's that we're trying to conduct business and take in questions. We do our homework, we then get back. And like I said, communication is essential, especially in this day and age. We just need to communicate more effectively, more frequently, and with the truth. And I think those are the elements that the public is looking for. The community is looking for those elements, okay? And as long as we can give that to them, as long as we can do our best, then I think we're doing our job. And our job is to serve the community.
Yes, running meetings is one of the things that I spend a lot of time on. As I said, I taught competitive teams in parliamentary procedure, Robert's Rules of Order, which is the parliamentary authority that the board uses when they need to pass a motion or something. And so knowing what the order of subsidiary motions and all of those things is what makes a meeting run well. So having an understanding of the agenda, the purpose, all of those things laid out will do it. I think can't be measured on just the length of the meeting, but it does have to be on the impact of the meeting. That is it getting accomplished what it needs to get accomplished. The district is great because this also included the quality of the district because of the quality of the teachers. And they come to us from a variety of different places with a variety of different skills, but the district has done a good job of promoting professional development, building on their skills, and one of the things just in modern education that's difficult to incorporate is the passion of each teacher to share with their classroom. We've got a lot of curricular restraints, we've got a lot of things, and so how, finding a way to open up someone that can teach their class about quilting, can teach their class about another passion that they might have in their life, that would only increase their awareness of what's out there for them, what they can do in their futures.
Thank you for all the wonderful questions from the audience. We're going to go ahead and have closing remarks. We'll start with Craig.
First of all, thanks for inviting me tonight. Thanks for this opportunity to share some of my feelings and beliefs. The idea of a school board, as Jim said, it's a community representative it's the community representative in the school district. And people need to know that the school board has one employee, and that's the superintendent. That's the only one we have. And so everything has to be kind of funneled through the superintendent. It's not like we get to the school board doesn't get to behave separately from what the rest of the district is doing. We have to do it in conjunction with what the superintendent is doing. And so from the superintendent's standpoint, everything gets, the district gets to decide policy that decides the what of the school district is going to do, and the superintendent then gets to decide the how it's going to get done. But then the school board then gets to evaluate the how and negotiating contracts and having an evaluation. So there's a cycle there between the what's and the hows, and then do we agree with how the how happens. So there's a good cycle there, and that's how school boards are supposed to function. I have, like I say, a lot of experience in education. As an ag teacher, I had a lot of experience with anything from milking cows to running a grain elevator to teaching about leadership skills, public speaking, all kinds of things that the ag world got to experience. So I've got a broad sense of interest, and I've got a broad sense of background that I can bring to the board to have some of the perspectives that maybe aren't there right now.
Well, I too would like to thank you for being here tonight. I'm ready to start a petition to the state legislature with you as our beginning signers, and how we can implement, how we can work better with the school district to get things through the legislature. Like Craig said, there's going to be some budgetary issues, but unless we get something moving, it's never going to get to their eyes. So we have to be proactive, and I think that's I'd like to encourage the young people in the audience tonight, as well as my age, not quite so old yet, because I think we still need movers and shakers in our population. We shouldn't be daunted by legislators saying we don't have the money, we don't have the time, we don't have this and that. We still need to be making a noise, and I think we can do that. I also wanted to tell you a story tonight, because someone asked me once, why are you running for the school board over and over and over again? And the school board in my high school actually saved me. I got into trouble as a senior in high school. And the principal and the superintendent said, "You're out of here, Jim." But it was the school board that came to my rescue. So they said, let's let him graduate. He doesn't get to walk, but he does get to graduate. And he doesn't get to go to the senior prom, which was really a crusher for me, because my girlfriend had to go alone. But the school board is what saved me, okay? And the rest, as they would say, is history. So thank you very much.
Now you can applaud. What a great conversation. Thank you both so much. I'd like to thank the candidates for participating and everyone who attended in person and over Zoom. If the candidates desire, I'll compile the questions that we did not get to and email that list to you, just for community communication to you. And I encourage community members to contact the candidates if you have any questions or if you want any clarification to any answers that were heard this evening. Before we adjourn, I want to remind everyone that today ballots are starting to be mailed, and the last day to register online is October 30th. You can register all the way up to voting day, including voting day, if you go in person to the elections office in Colfax, or if you go up to the WSU campus in the ballroom on the second floor of the Cub. They also have a voting site, and you can register in person there. Also, Deb tells everybody all the time, put your phone number on your ballot. That way, if there's something wrong with your ballot, you'll be called. So I used to be just freaked out about putting my phone number on the outside of the ballot because I'm just a really private person, and that really just bothered me. But she's convinced me that it's worthwhile doing that. So for example, if there's a mismatch with your signature or something like that, you'll get a phone call. Yes, ma'am?
So you said that they have a voting spot in the Cub, but that's only on election day, right?
That's only on election day, yeah.
8 to 8.
8 to 8. Oh yeah, sign me up. And yeah, ballots will begin being mailed today. That doesn't mean you'll get yours today, but you should get it soon. So that's all. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate your participation.